What up, everybody? I'm going to give people a few minutes to join us for Talk About It Tuesdays. And then we are going to jump into today's topic. I want to say thank you to everybody that's tuning in and that has been commenting on our post, sharing the post for Talk About It Tuesdays. Today is going to be a good topic. We're talking about the link between male promiscuity and sexual trauma. I think this is a topic that a lot of people don't talk about. And so I kind of want to just have a brief discussion. I would love for people to share, what they know, share resources on the comments for people who may have experienced some sexual trauma and feel like they're, still dealing with the aftermath of that. But I just want to say thank you. Keep supporting us. The podcast will drop the first Friday in June. So we are gearing up for that. And we are just really working on trying to make living the stress life as beneficial and helpful. If you are watching and you definitely think someone can benefit from today's discussion, please invite them. Host a watch party. Share the live after it's been posted to the page. But I want to say again, thank you. So for the sake of not drawing this out, Talk About It Tuesdays is just our live version of the podcast where we kind of discuss some topics that we haven't discussed on the podcast or may not be discussing on the podcast to just keep the conversation going. We launched last week. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and with me being a licensed professional counselor and someone who deals with clients who have a history of trauma or who are dealing with mental illness or stressors that lead to mental illness, I just think it's really important to really break the stigma associated with mental illness and all the things that lead to mental illness. And so living the stress life is all about managing those stressors that lead to unhealthy mental space, unhealthy emotional space. So I'm gonna jump into today's topic. I don't know how many of you guys follow the Red Table Talk, but I'm a big fan of Jada and Will Smith. They out here living their best life. I think they are a great model for Black couples who are living their truths, being honest that marriage is not easy, relationships are not easy, but they recognize that their life is so much better supporting one another and having real love in it. And so I was watching the Red Table Talk, and this week she had former NBA star Keon Dooling on her show, and he talked about his challenge or journey with mental illness as a result of some sexual trauma in his childhood and how that manifested in his adulthood and how his life just took a turn for the unexpected as a result of some PTSD symptoms. And so as I was listening, they dropped some statistics, and I'm gonna share those same statistics. Research and science says that 1 in 6 men have experienced sexual abuse or sexual assault, whether in childhood or as adults. Now, I don't know how many of you guys realize how big of a deal that is, but that's a pretty high number, 1 in 6. So if you have a group of 6 friends, 1 out of that group of 6 people have experienced sexual trauma as a man, either as a child or as an adult. And Keon Dooling talked about how as a child he was sexually victimized and how over his life he spent so much time trying to suppress that and was successful at suppressing those memories and the emotional and mental trauma associated with that particular act, and how it manifested in his adulthood after someone grabbed him, a drunk man stumbled into the bathroom and grabbed his butt, how that just that one incident caused all of these suppressed memories and emotions to surface, and he just kind of pretty much had a psychotic break. And he also talked about how his friends and his support system really helped him out. But as he talked about his experience, and as he talked about how he tried to deal and cope with that experience, he talked about at one point questioning his sexuality, and how in his journey to really discover, did I do something to ask for this older male to sexually victimize me? If I ask for that, am I really attracted to men? And how during that process as a teen, he became very promiscuous. And so there are a lot of emotions, a lot of behaviors associated with sexual trauma. But I looked up some statistics. I know that I used to deal with it. I don't deal with it as much, but when I worked at a behavioral hospital here, all of my clients, or the majority of my clients, were males. And I dealt with a lot of males that had a history of sexual trauma. But it's funny because as I looked up these statistics preparing for this not the Red Table Talk, for Talk About It Tuesdays, after watching the Red Table Talk, I was surprised at how my eyes were reopened to these statistics. And so, one of the things that I recognize that our adolescents are most often targeted for male sexual abuse. I would have thought that it was little boys, but actually teen boys are at the highest risk for being sexually victimized. And typically men who are sexually victimized are victimized by another man. And when it began to talk about, one of the behaviors being promiscuity or being promiscuous, I think we take for granted today in today's society how many men are going through all these women because they're trying to sort out issues from their manhood being compromised. It's a very emasculating for a man to be sexually assaulted by an older female or by a female. But when you're sexually assaulted or sexually traumatized by another man, I don't think many women really understand the impact that takes on a man's manhood. And so I wanted to talk about today's culture. In videos, in movies, we see a lot of men running through women. It's a thing that has become the norm, that if you have fame, if you have power, and especially if you are attractive, you are expected to sleep around. You're expected to go through a pool of women. But how many of us really stop and think, especially as women who have been mistreated or who have had our heart broken by a man because he can't be committed or he can't be monogamous? Have we stopped and asked ourselves, if he's going through all these women, is it because he's been sexually traumatized? Is there an underlying issue? And sexual trauma can even come from pornography. I remember starting off as a new therapist, going through this training about people who have sexual addictions. And one of the things that were pointed out in those statistics, that was kids who are exposed to pornography at a very young age. It is just as traumatic sometimes for them because they're not mentally and emotionally ready to process sex. It can be just as traumatic as being raped or molested. But I don't think many of us stop. We just assume that men going through a bunch of women is just the nature of men. It's just the nature of boys. They're very physical beings. They get turned on because of the most simple things. Their eyes are really a gateway to their souls. But how many of us ever stop and say, is this person acting this way because they have some unresolved trauma? Is this person engaging this way with women because they're trying to prove to themselves that they are heterosexual or that they are actually attracted to women. And so many older men or older boys who actually perpetrate other boys, younger boys or boys the same age, are doing so more than likely because they've been perpetrated. And so Talk About It Tuesdays is really to just start the discussion today about what's happening with our males, especially in the African American culture. I can't really speak for anybody else's culture because I'm Black. I've been Black since the day I was born. I'm always going to be Black. But I know for me as a mom who is raising two sons, for one, I think it put me on high alert because my son he's a teenager. He's about to be 15, and I'm a little bit more comfortable with him going places and doing things with friends or going on school trips and not feeling like me and my husband have to go because he's old enough to like speak up for himself or, navigate situations where he's made to feel uncomfortable or be afraid. But I never really thought about, is his age making him more susceptible for someone to come in and perpetrate him or victimize him? And as a mother and as a licensed professional counselor, do I know what to look for? What questions do I know to ask? I know what change of behavior looks like. I know the anger, the fear, the shame, the confusion. I process that inside of the therapy session. But what does that look like when it comes home? And am I seeing those behaviors with, my brothers, my cousins, my husband, my children? Like, when I'm looking at them, am I looking at them for that trauma? Am I looking to see, has there been a change or a shift in them? And so I want to encourage you guys to start looking at the men in your life with different eyes, especially those friends and close males in your life who are perhaps acting out very sexually. Don't assume that that is the societal norm. Don't assume that they are okay, because men, we discussed in season 1 of the podcast, they express anxiety and depression and their feelings way differently than women express their feelings. But as a woman, I shouldn't be dismissive of anything that I'm seeing with them. Oh, that's just how boys are. No, boys are not just born into the world to be promiscuous. Boys are just like girls. They are innocent. They are, they see the world with fresh green eyes until someone puts them in a position where they have to look at the world as an adult. And so while there's a big push for this whole Me Too movement and Time's Up movement, let's not forget that men are also susceptible, or boys are also susceptible to sexual trauma. And when we start seeing men running through women, if you care about the men in your life, ask them, are they okay? Make sure that they have a space and a person to be able to discuss their feelings and what's going on with them. I want to say thanks to everybody that's joining in. Hey, Lamar. Hey, Maisha. Hey, Bree. Hey, Wayne, and Bow Athletics. I appreciate y'all tuning in. Share this video. Let's talk about it. Let's break the stigma associated with male promiscuity. We talk so much about broken women, especially when women are wearing little clothes and shaking their butts and doing all this stuff. And we talk about sexual trauma when we see homosexual men and just assume they're that way because they've been victimized or because they didn't have a man in the house. But, you're right, Lamar. Men are less likely to talk about when they've been victimized. There's so much shame that goes along with it. You don't want, the number one thing that I heard on the Rad Table Talk that Keon Dooling said, which I learned as a therapist talking to the young boys that I work with, is you don't want people to think that you're gay because some other man took advantage of you or because some other man perpetrated you. Hey, Portia. Welcome to Talk About It Tuesdays. So, if you know that men question their sexuality, the only way that they can answer that question, or they feel they can answer that question, is by sleeping with a whole bunch of women. And so let's not dismiss it. Let's check in on our men. Let's break the stigma. Let's break that cycle. Let's break those strongholds on our men's life. I'm a Christian. I believe that there are things that we are born into this world with, these strongholds on our life, and they are passed down from generation to generation. And so my goal is to break the cycle in my own children's life, but every life that I touch. And so Talk About Tuesdays is our platform to have some difficult discussions. I appreciate Scott. Scott Darce, I want to give him a shout out. He shared his personal experience. Last week, we talked about the impact of miscarriage on men and men being the forgotten grievers. And I know I just so happened to choose to talk about men this week, but after seeing the Red Table Talk, it just got my mind thinking. And although I'm not necessarily talking about how men act out, I am taking one particular behavior, which is male promiscuity, and just kind of highlighting that and saying, you know what? So many of us are dismissive that this behavior is linked to sexual trauma. So let's talk about it. Give me your feedback. Follow the podcast. The new podcast, season 2, drops the first Friday of June. We are gearing up. We're going to have some great interviews with some local people, business owners, politicians, moms, dads, other mental health therapists, really joining in some difficult discussions. But that's the goal of living a stress life. So until next time, live your best life, living through the stress life.